10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Rhodes, as Greece's Prime Minister says his country is at war.
Evacuate immediately to Rhodes.
Forced out by the fires, the locals and thousands of tourists escaping to safety. The warning, the emergency services must remain on constant alert as strengthening winds fan the flames. We see the British visitors waiting for their chance to flee as tour operators cancel flights to the island. And back home and safe, the families and friends reunited after a terrifying ordeal.
Also on Sky News at 10 tonight. The Islamist preacher Anjem Chowdhury appears in court on terror charges relating to the banned group Al-Mujahirun. Trying to turn the corner after his by-election bashing, the Prime Minister pushes the building of hundreds of thousands of new homes. Signing off, football's original £1 million man, Trevor Francis, who's died suddenly at the age of 69. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30.
Hello and good evening from Rhodes. As you join me tonight, the fires that are burning in the centre of this island are still well alight. And Greece's Prime Minister has said that his country is at war and completely focused on tackling them. Now, among the stranded are thousands of British tourists. But despite that, as it stands at the moment, more are still free to come. A decision which Downing Street has today defended. And this isn't the only part of Greece suffering. There are wildfires across the mainland and several islands, including Corfu. In a moment, we'll hear from our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, who's there. But first, my report from the island where the worst fires are burning, where I witnessed the retreat from Rhodes.
Evacuate immediately to Rhodes.
In Masari, they're clearing out. This is the final warning. It's time to leave. The flames are coming. They quickly try to protect what they can, to batten down the hatches with no idea what will be left when they return. Can't you see the smoke? The fire is coming. It's coming to the village, says Yorgos. Within minutes, he will join the exodus. Of course, I'm afraid I have small children, explains Artie, already in his car. This is the third time his village has been evacuated in 3 days. This is the source of the danger, a wildfire threatening 2 villages. But some have stayed behind to fight. We cannot go. We will go straight to the fire because if we leave, everything will burn, McAllis says. Firefighters are now fighting these blazes on several fronts, and this wind that's whipping around is making it even more dangerous and difficult. Minutes later, the fire changes direction. We're told to get out as reinforcements prepare to go in. It's a repeating pattern. Along the coast, flames have also broken through defences. The same places blazes forced people from their hotels at the weekend.
It's been really traumatic. You could see the whole headland was alight, and it was scary.
With bags covered in soot and stinking of smoke, Claire and the kids have come to the airport to try to grab spots on the first repatriation flights back to the UK. They're not alone. Tired bodies cover the floor. Jack has been trying to leave since Saturday. And how do you feel this whole situation's been dealt with? When are you going to get home?
Shockingly, absolutely shocking. But still, regardless of whatever's happening, you should at least get some representative to speak to you and advise you. We've had no one. We've literally been just left on our own.
He's among hundreds of tourists who are looking for answers, many still sleeping in shelters, waiting to escape. Physically and economically, this disaster has already left its mark on Rhodes. Scars from a wildfire season
which is only just beginning.
So the fires here on Rhodes may be more advanced, but over on Corfu, more than 2,000 people also had to be moved to safety, and some of those had to be rescued by the Coast Guard by boat. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, reports on the concern in Corfu.
Wildfires are marching their way through a second night on Corfu. For tourists arriving on the island, the smell of grilling souvlaki is mixed with that of a forest on fire.
We woke up this morning to hear that there was fires, saw it on the news. The owner of our apartment, Dimitris, he got in touch and said that the fire was out, so we felt pretty relaxed. We were talking to lots of the locals. We went out, spent the day snorkeling, had dinner, but we haven't been able to get back up to the apartment because this is the main road going up into the hills where the fire is.
It looks really close to our villa, but also since everybody else is quite calm, I'm also reassured. So it's like that in-between line where you're sort of feeling nervous but sort of not.
But for some in villages on steep coasts, the fires risk cutting them off. Now nearly 2,500 have been evacuated, many by boat from beaches. Given the extreme heat of recent weeks, the Greek Prime Minister has asked his country to be on high alert for fire.
It's certain that over the next few days, over the next few weeks, we must all remain on constant alert. I know very well that my words may sound trite, but they are sincere. They describe what I experienced in recent days. We are currently at war, completely focused on the fire.
On Corfu, the fires are so far confined to forests away from properties. Light winds and experienced crews have helped keep them under control, though local media reports 4 firefighters have been hospitalised. Officials here on Corfu say it's arsonists that started these fires in the hills behind me, but they couldn't have caused the conditions that allow those fires to take hold and to spread, burn more intensely and extend the season in which wildfires can happen. That, of course, is due to our changing climate. On average, the world has warmed just over 1 degree, but now Greece experiences nearly 3 times as many days above 30 Celsius as it did in the 1950s. Averages mask the danger that exists at our climate's extremes, and there's only more to come.
Well, we can talk to Tom now. Tom, you've been on Corfu all day. What struck you the most since you've been reporting from there?
I think what strikes me is an atmosphere of sort of cautious calm here. This island is a lot less forested than Rhodes, and the extent of wildfires are therefore smaller. I don't know if you can make out in the hills behind me, probably obscured by the city light, there's a glow coming. That's the northeast corner of the island where most of the forest is. There's a very active fire front going on in the centre there, and another one in a gully that's getting closer to properties that firefighters are working hard to keep away from villas and from hotels. But so far, as you may have heard in my report, no properties have been endangered. I think the reason for that calm is that wildfires are routine in the summer in the Mediterranean. This is not something new, but what we have to see what's going on at the moment in the context of what's going on around the rest of the world. We've seen unprecedented heat here in Europe for a prolonged period of time, also in Asia, concurrently with what's going on in North America as well, with a very intense wildfire season in Canada. And that gives us some sense of what we might have coming towards us with climate change. You know, we're just a degree plus warmer on average globally at the moment, but look at the impacts it's starting to have. Does this give us a clear indication of where climate is going to take us as we head to probably more than nearly double that by That's why we need to pay close attention to what's happening now, how fires.
A steady stream of repatriation flights have landed at British airports, and with them, the hundreds of people on board have brought stories of fear that they faced when they fled from those fires. So one person told Sky News of the smoke getting in their chest. The other talked of unbearable heat. And Dan Whitehead has met some of those people, now safe back home.
Touching down at Birmingham Airport on Monday morning, one of the first repatriation flights to flee the fires. 124 Brits were on board, but getting a seat has been a battle after a terrifying experience.
Everybody was in reception from the hotel, thousands of people, and then it was get to the beach, get to the beach. At that point, when you was on the beach, you just had to dump your luggage because you couldn't drag it across the sand. So, yeah, and as you look behind you, it was just coming over, you know, the mountains type thing. The fire was just moving so fast.
The fire was just behind our hotel, so we had to leave all of our luggage, passports and everything in the room. And then we were walking for 2 hours to get away from the fire and the smoke.
I saw everyone crying and it made me quite scared. And there was like lots of smoke and it kept on getting in people's chests.
The Maguire family arrived on Saturday night and didn't even make it to their hotel.
We got off the plane, we booked a private transfer and they said, no, we can't take you, we're on fire. So we got evacuated to a school. And we slept on the floor. My daughter's got a photograph, and we just slept on the floor. If it wasn't for the Greek people, we would have had nothing. And we've not had our holiday, which is, you know, we'll get over that. But the people over there, they've got nothing.
Emily and Andrew were just hours into their honeymoon before their evacuation began.
We get into Rhodes, we see the flames as we're going through, and we're going, oh my God, that is awful. Land, get out, join the biggest queue I've ever seen in my life to get told at the TUI station that some of the hotels are burning down. We got put then on a coach to an evacuation camp. We slept on a mattress on the street because the buildings were that hot and there was 30 people to a room and it was just, yeah, unbearable.
As the fires burn, the busy holiday season is underway. The advice for those heading to the Greek islands is to check before you travel. For the thousands already there, it could be a trip cut short. Dan Whitehead, Sky News at Birmingham Airport.
Now, despite that smoke and the flames, which we've witnessed here again today, there is very little sign that British holidaymakers are being put off coming to Greece. And British Airways has said that customers can change their return flights, though, from Corfu and Rhodes free of charge. And those flying out can delay if they want. Jet2 has cancelled all new flights to Rhodes until next Sunday, but it is laying on repatriation flights. Ryanair told us today that overall demand for bookings across Europe is strong and there's currently no need for it to provide special repatriation flights. And TUI has cancelled all outbound flights to Rhodes until Friday at the earliest. Our business correspondent Gurpreet Narwan reports on the holidays under threat.
Returning from a nightmare, but the horrors are still fresh in the minds of holidaymakers and the tourist industry that serves them. Wildfires on the Greek islands of Corfu and Rhodes have turned the heat on tour operators. They're being scrutinised over how they've handled the evacuations.
Tour operators have sent out planes empty to make sure that they can get those people back to the UK and even put on extra flights. They've done that as fast as possible. Having said that, obviously it wasn't not a very pleasant experience, to say the least, for people involved, and not a great end to their holiday.
Travel agents like Rebecca Kingston say some tour operators have communicated to their customers better than others. For those waiting to go away, it's an anxious prelude to what should be a relaxing summer holiday.
The great British summertime has let us down massively this year. People are more desperate for a holiday than ever. We're still seeing like the recovery from COVID. Some people, this is their first holiday in about 3 years. So they're really looking forward to it.
This is no doubt frustrating for holidaymakers, many of whom are still unsure about whether their holidays will go ahead. And it poses a logistical challenge for airlines who are now having to arrange evacuations during the peak summer period. But beyond that, the industry is confident about its prospects. After the crippling effect of the lockdown, they should make a mere dent in a recovery that is well and truly underway. Airlines and agents say bookings are still strong. With little sunshine and cheer at home, people are still desperate to get away.
We'll be carrying, somewhere over 18 million passengers in July and August this year. Today alone we've over 602,000 passengers and 3,200 flights. So no, there's no shortage of people who want to get away. I think after having been locked up for a few years.
Cancellations, evacuations, strikes and delays. It's become par for the course. But as long as it continues to rain in July here, the foreign holiday is alive and well. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Well, the fires which have forced so many people from their homes and their hotels here have been fanned by strong winds. It's past midnight here. They're still whipping around. And the fire outlook right across this region continues to look bleak. Our climate change and energy correspondent, Hannah Thomas-Peter, explains what's been fanning the flames.
On Sunday, a satellite passed over the Earth, taking ultra-high resolution images of the planet. It's a picture from 330 miles away, and at first glance, it looks serene. But here in the corner, you can see Rhodes, which is anything but. The fires here are so big, this plume of smoke is visible from space. We can zoom in now and have a closer look at what's going on. This map from NASA shows us the fires burning at the moment. But to understand how it became so dire so quickly, we have to go back a few days. So this is the situation on Thursday. You can see a cluster of fires in the centre of the island here. And this shows what's happening with the wind on the same day. Crucially, wind gusts are relatively slow at 17 kilometres per hour or 11 miles per hour, and they're blowing the fires away from the coastal resorts here in the south. But on Friday, things start to change. The fires, you can see, haven't grown too much yet, but there is a really significant shift in the wind direction and the speed of the gusts, fanning the fires now down towards the south. When you look at Saturday, you can see exactly what's happened as a result. A huge increase in the size of that wildfire and even faster gusts of wind, making those blazes extremely difficult to bring under control. This satellite photograph from Sunday gives you a sense of just how large the burn area is. It has been an unusually bad period for Greece as a whole. As this chart indicates, the blue line shows the average weekly burn area over the last 17 years, normally peaking in mid-August. But this red line shows what's happening in 2023 with a well above average burn area much earlier in the summer season. The Mediterranean is especially vulnerable to wildfires because mild, wet winters allow vegetation to grow and then hot, dry summers turn that vegetation into very effective fuel. And this isn't just a problem restricted to Greece. This is the European Commission's fire danger assessment for today and tomorrow, and you can see just how widespread the risk is. It will remain that way until the temperatures start to fall, and that isn't due to happen until later this week.
Well, I'll be back in a few minutes with more reflections on the events here in Rhodes. But for now, it's back to Sally in the Sky News Centre.
Siobhan, thank you. Good evening. The Islamist preacher Anjem Choudhury has appeared in court accused of terrorism offences. They relate to the banned organisation Al-Mujahirun. He's accused of being a member of it and directing the activities of a terror organisation. Our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt, reports.
If convicted, the prominent Islamic preacher could face a life sentence in jail. He was arrested at his East London home and charged with directing the activities of a terror group, Al-Mujahirun. It was banned in the UK in 2010. In court, Choudhury was also accused of being a member of the group and giving online lectures to encourage support for it.
A second man also appeared in court, a Canadian, Khaled Hussein, who's 28. He faces one charge, membership of the same organisation. He was arrested on the same day as Choudhury after flying into London from Canada.
Choudhury's lawyer asked for bail, but it was refused. He and Hussein were kept in custody. They will appear again at the Old Bailey on the 4th of August. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at Westminster Magistrates Court.
Police in Jerusalem have used water cannon to try and disperse protesters who gathered to oppose changes to Israel's justice system. The country's parliament approved legislation which limits the Supreme Court's ability to challenge parliamentary decisions and changes the way judges are selected. The vote was passed unanimously after the opposition party stormed out. The BBC has apologised to Nigel Farage for suggesting he lacked the funds needed to hold an account at private bank Coutts after they debanked him. The BBC's business editor said the information for the initial story came from a trusted and senior source, however, turned out to be incomplete and inaccurate. Mr. Farage says he's very pleased to have received the BBC's apology. And friends and colleagues of George Alagiah have been remembering the BBC presenter after he passed away at the age of 67. He was diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer 9 years ago. The award-winning journalist worked as a foreign correspondent before moving to presenting, where he fronted the BBC's News at 6 for more than 20 years. Rishi Sunak's hold on power at the next election appears hardly as safe as houses, but the government seems to be putting at least some of its hopes for a recovery in its popularity ratings on its ability to encourage more building. That faces opposition, including from within its own ranks, one Conservative MP describing it as nonsense. Our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue, reports from Cambridge.
After a by-election bruising, a Prime Minister hoping to turn a corner.
Definitely way forward, right?
With a policy push on a contentious subject.
We're making it easier for people to expand homes upwards and outwards. We're making it easier to build on brownfield sites with more investment, and we're investing in the planning system. So taken together, that's a practical approach that will mean more people can own their own home, but we're doing that in the right way.
And a promise too from the Housing Secretary.
A Britain with many more homes.
It's not the first time, though, that he's made that pledge.
Do you stand by the government's commitment to build 300,000 homes a year by the middle of the 2020s, or is it, as a former Conservative housing minister said, a target that's going to be missed by a country mile?
The 300,000 target by the middle of this decade is one I completely stand by. And it will be the case, I'm sure, that Conservative backbenchers and others, once they have a chance to look at our plans, will realise that this is in the national interest, and that's why we're acting.
But action in places like Cambridgeshire, where the government wants to build a new urban quarter, is already facing resistance.
We understand that we need homes, but someone needs to get together with someone else so that actually it's done in a, I'll say it again, sustainable, environmentally friendly way.
The roads, we don't have enough school places, the doctors' surgery is under a lot of pressure.
From the public.
They're moving so many more people into Camborne, but the amenities aren't being upgraded.
And the local MP here too, who tweeted to say, "I'll do everything I can to stop the government's nonsense plans to impose mass house building on Cambridge." He blamed a shortage of water in the area already, not being able to resource any more homes.
The Prime Minister said the government won't be concreting over the countryside, and the focus today has certainly been on urban areas and brownfield sites. But that tension still exists between the need to build more homes and local opposition, a tension that has seen Conservative housing policy watered down before.
How to provide enough housing for a growing population. It's one of the burning challenges of our time, a challenge that may well become a big election battleground. Ali Fortescue, Sky News, South Cambridge.
Now, on the day the world's biggest ever football transfer offer was made of more than £250 million for French star Kylian Mbappe, a mere million might seem a drop in the ocean. But in 1979, it gave Trevor Francis his place in history. Football's first £1 million man has now died at the age of just 69, and he's being remembered for much more than that price tag, as our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports.
They were football's miracle men. A miracle conjured in this moment by this man. Remarkably turning the unheralded underdogs of Nottingham Forest into champions of Europe.
And Trevor Francis, the £1 million man, puts his name on the score sheet.
a goal on his European debut in the 1979 European Cup final. 3 months after, Mercurial manager Brian Clough made Trevor Francis Britain's first £1 million player.
I didn't quite realise the importance of becoming the first £1 million footballer. I remember that Friday evening it was headlines on the national news, and of course the following morning it was across the back and also on the front of most newspapers, and I became the £1 million man.
It was as one of the game's good guys he was remembered by his former captain. John McGovern signing the book of condolence hours after Francis suffered a heart attack in Spain and died at the age of 69.
It was really genuine, you know, I mean, £1 million player, you think he might have a little bit of a strut on him, you know. Not at all, not at all. Although, once you get with a group of footballers that are quite successful, it's no good trying to crow around and act the big man, because you'll get knocked down straight away.
He was a prodigy who made his debut for Birmingham at 16 and played 52 times for England, with 2 goals at the 1982 World Cup. Trophies were won with Sampdoria, Rangers and Sheffield Wednesday, who he then led into the Premier League as player manager. A player with a gift for scoring, and in a sport now with £100 million players, Trevor Francis was the first to hit the £1 million milestone. Rob Harris, Sky News.
Finally tonight, in evocative language, Greece's Prime Minister has said his country is at war against the wildfires here. Now, that may seem strong, but here on Rhodes, it feels all too appropriate.
The fire was just behind us. Yeah, it was awful.
I saw everyone crying and it made me quite scared. And there was like lots of smoke and it kept on getting in people's chests.
There was nobody there to look after us. It was just traumatising. It was so traumatising.
We're really only at the start of the fire season here, yet when you travel around this island, the impact of what's happening is all too clear. Whether it's the hotels which have been gutted, the businesses closed, the bustling tourist resorts which have been turned into ghost towns, the tourists who've come on holiday to be left sleeping on the floors of schools. And in the next few days, the temperatures will ramp up again. The risk here is far from over.
Siobhan, thank you. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll be taking a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview, including this story on the front of the Eye and claims by a leading consumer group that airlines were irresponsible to carry on flying people into those Greek wildfires or into those areas. And tonight we're joined by The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar, and the political journalist and broadcaster, Theo Usherwood. There they are, standing by for us. We'll see you after this short break. Welcome back. This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Hundreds of British tourists have arrived back to the UK on repatriation flights from Greece, where wildfires still rage. The government has pledged to build more homes to solve the housing crisis, despite missing previous targets. And Britain's first £1 million footballer, Trevor Francis, has died at the age of 69. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive, and it's time to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Creer, and the political journalist and broadcaster, Theo Usherwood. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's have a look at what's on some of those front pages. The Eye quotes the consumer group Which, describing airlines which flew passengers into the Greek wildfire zones without the opportunity to rebook or to get a refund as irresponsible. The Metro focuses on one Brit, Jonathan Lewis, who used his holiday rental car to rescue a number of frightened families from the flames in Rhodes. The Express has this headline, Race to Rescue Britons in Greek Wildfires Nightmare. The Mirror has more stories of people escaping the fires with the headline, We Ran for Our Lives. The Times say 30,000 people are still trapped on holiday by these fires. The Guardian hears from scientists who say the link between the fires and climate change is undeniable. The Telegraph reports that the chairman of NatWest is under mounting pressure to find out what role the bank's chief executive played, if any, in the leaking of Nigel Farage's private financial information to the BBC. City AM invokes Monty Python to cover Twitter's much criticised rebrand, declaring this is an expert. The Financial Times reports that Credit Suisse has been fined hundreds of millions of dollars for failings over the collapse of a US investment company, which also led to the bank's own demise. And the Star ponders whether a spaceship might have crashed on Mars. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you're watching us. And we're joined tonight by Pippa Creer and Theo Usherwood. Let's get going. Great to have you both with us. Pippa, I'll kick off with you first, if I may. The Daily Express sums up the wildfires quite well. Race to rescue Britons in Greek wildfires nightmare. 10,000 British citizens caught up in the fires.
Yeah, I mean, this has been this astonishing story that we've watched unfurl over the last 7 days. It's not uncommon for southern European countries to experience wildfires. In fact, I remember a few years ago driving through Montenegro and seeing the mountainside on fire not too far from us. But the scale of the fire in Rhodes has been really dramatic and alarming, not least for the tens of thousands of British tourists that are currently there or have been there. Before you even get to the impact that it will have had on the homes and livelihoods of the Greek people themselves. The Greek economy is obviously incredibly reliant on tourism. I think it's about 25% of its GDP comes from tourism. So the country is absolutely prioritising, making sure that people know that human life comes first. If you remember, there was an awful story of a fire raging through a resort in Greece about 5 years ago, a resort called Mati, where 100 people died in their homes and their cars. And the Greeks will be absolutely really determined to make sure that they don't have any repeat of loss of life, as had happened so tragically then. But it seems to have been a very, as well as dramatic, a rather chaotic evacuation process, with people ending up waiting for hours on beaches. Eventually, the Greek Navy coming in, but before that, sort of flotilla of small boats trying to take people from the south of Ireland and move them to the north. People sleeping on the airport floors, flights coming in even while others were attempting to get home and be repatriated to Britain. And the Greek Prime Minister has said that they're at war with fire, that the next few days are going to be crucial with high temperatures continuing. But it doesn't look like they've got the situation under control yet. And that obviously is very worrying for people, not just who are there, but people who have loved ones who are out there on holiday and trying to get home.
Yeah, and as Pippa has been discussing, Theo, you know, of course, there are so many issues to discuss here when it comes to what the residents of some of these islands are going through, climate change. But of course, the main story dominating most of the front pages tomorrow is this scramble to escape for so many tourists who, when you read the accounts, have been through some rather terrifying ordeals.
Yes, and just to underscore what Pippa was saying, if you look at the front page, there's an article on the front page of the Daily Telegraph where Alicia Kearns, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, is asking the government, saying the government needs to introduce more tighter guidance so that people know that they shouldn't be travelling to the region because of the risks of wildfires. And as people were saying, which the consumer group, and this was reported on the front of the Eye, has described as irresponsible the actions of some of the tourist operators flying people in at the very same time as actually there's been an effort to get people out of the region, and of course for the Greek people and the Greek economy and the reliance that the Greek economy has on tourism, what it means not just this year, because people are obviously not going to be, if people are being evacuated from the country, they're not going to be staying there for holidays and spending their money, but what it means in future years if because of climate change, this part of Europe just becomes somewhere that just you can't rely on as a holiday destination because of the risk of very severe heat, and then of course as a result significant wildfires that can put your family and yourself in danger in the way that we've seen and the scenes we've seen, the stories told on the front page of the papers and across the broadcasters over the last 48 hours or so.
Yeah, Pippa, as Theo was describing there, you know, the front page of the Eye calling some of these airlines irresponsible for continuing to fly passengers to some of these areas at the moment. But it raises big questions, doesn't it, in terms of insurance, what people are covered for. Many of these people booked their holidays a long time ago and wouldn't have known that these would be the circumstances. And until the FCO, until the Foreign and Commonwealth Office changes its travel advice, for many people that they're not even entitled to a refund.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for many people, not all. And Number 10 was at pains today to point out that it's not, the insurance doesn't depend necessarily on FCDO travel advice, but for the vast majority of people with policies, unless the FCDO suggests that people don't go to Rhodes, then it's on them if they cancel and therefore won't be getting refunds. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of mitigation measures put in place by either insurers or indeed by the tour companies. If you read your travel insurance, there's always small print that says that there are certain acts of God, wildfires presumably are one of them, given the high temperatures, that aren't covered. And for many people, this will be thousands of pounds worth of holidays that often they've been saving up for and looking forward to. And there won't be any insurance forthcoming. And there was some suggestion earlier today at Westminster that the FCDO might update their guidance, but we've all been sort of refreshing the page regularly, and they haven't yet. They will be obviously keeping a very close eye on it. The situation in Corfu, another Greek island, apparently, although alarming last night, and there was a couple of thousand people that were evacuated, they apparently have that under control now. According to the local politicians, but it's Rhodes really, I think, which is most alarming for people, and particularly when you look at the hottest temperatures that Greece has had, hottest temperatures in 50 years apparently, hitting 45 degrees in an area called Thessaly. And of course, with those high temperatures comes hot, dry winds, which are basically superfood for fires. And it is one of the reasons why they've spread so fast. But tour guides, tour operators, even though Downing Street and the government is saying that in the first instance people should speak to their tour companies, as the front page of the Eye suggests, they haven't necessarily been behaving in the way that you might expect, with flights going out even on Saturday night when it was quite clear that actually it was a very difficult and indeed dangerous situation in a large swathes of Rhodes, and the knock-on effect of that was people fled and sort of were put up in sports halls and hotel lobbies, other hotel lobbies, in other resorts. The Greek people helped a lot of people, took a lot of people, tourists, into their own homes, and obviously on the airport floor itself. And yet the tour operators seemed to think that it was okay to keep sending people out there. Now, you'd think that some of the big operators would have very senior teams of people sitting down and working at actually, first and foremost, whether this is a safe and responsible thing to do, and which the consumer group here says that they concluded that it absolutely wasn't. So I think there'll be answers as this situation gets under control. There'll be questions as the situation gets under control, and people demanding answers as to what decisions the tour operators made and whether they were the right ones or not.
Yeah, certainly lots of big consumer questions to answer, as you say, and Theo, lots of climate questions to answer as well. Pippa's paper, the front page of The Guardian, leading on this tomorrow, that the climate crisis is linked to the heat waves and these fires, scientists calling that link undeniable.
Yes, the front page of The Guardian leading on that report by a group of scientists, which it says there's an inextricable link between climate change and what we're seeing in Europe. And of course, this is a story that's been previously told in Australia during, it was 18 months ago or so, we had those extraordinary wildfires in Australia, and there was debate amongst the politicians about what was the reason for it, and climate change again top of the list. I mean, here in the UK, it's possible to look out of the window and see the rain and the wind and say, what climate change? And of course, you only have to, now it's getting closer and closer to our front door, if you like, in what we're seeing in southern Europe. This heat wave is by and large unprecedented, record temperatures in Greece, and we've seen those temperatures out in Italy and in Spain as well. The scientists have come to the conclusion, and it's impossible to see any other conclusion, that the reason for this is that is global warming and climate change, and that something has to be done. And of course, we've had numerous COP meetings, but there's going to be mounting pressure, I'd have thought, in London, Westminster, and across Europe for more action to be taken to try and mitigate against the rising temperatures, because of course it has, as we were talking about previously, a huge knock-on impact on the economy in Greece.
Okay, Theo, Pippa, we'll give you a brief breather. See you again in just a moment. We'll be looking at more of the front pages after this short break, including, could a formal inquiry be launched into the handling of Nigel Farage's banking affairs? We'll be discussing that next.
You know, when I moved here in 2010, it was an interesting time. Ukraine had just elected a president who was friendly with Russia, Viktor Yanukovych. But, you know, this was a time that was particularly challenging politically and economically for Ukraine. And yet, you know, there was no explicit sign that Russia would invade Ukraine. However, I do recall some conversations after my arrival here, and as I became more involved in reporting on politics, that there had been some concern in Ukrainian political circles and military circles about a potential future invasion. And the reason for that was the 2008 invasion of Georgia by Russia. And so, you know, that was something that was in the back of Ukrainians' minds, but it wasn't evident until really 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea that there could very well be an active armed conflict in Ukraine. At this stage, you know, Lukashenko many people in the West, the international community, does not see Lukashenko as the legitimately elected president. It was an election a couple of years back that was widely believed to be rigged. And since that point, really, Lukashenko has relied heavily on Vladimir Putin and Russia to keep him in power. Now, interestingly, Putin is relying greatly on Lukashenko and Belarus and his resources to essentially use Belarus as a launch pad and a place that is crucial for Russian military logistics as it continues its grinding invasion of Ukraine. In the very city center of Odessa, we saw the destruction of a very old Orthodox church yesterday. But a lot of these missiles are targeting grain silos and infrastructure meant for the export of grains from Ukraine that are supposed to be going to African countries, for example, Asian countries. Ukraine is unable right now to export a lot of what it's growing, and it's having a major impact not only on the local economy, but the global economy, and certainly exacerbating hunger in places that are in great need of food.
Welcome back. You're watching The Press Preview, and with me is Pippa Crerar and Theo Usherwood. Let's have a look at a few more of the front pages. Pippa, let's have a look at the Daily Telegraph to start with. Really interesting story about the Nigel Farage fallout with Coutts Bank. Of course, the BBC has apologised today, as many people will be aware, for an inaccurate story that claimed Coutts had shut down Mr Farage's account because he didn't meet the financial requirements. And there's now pressure to find out whether some of that information may have been leaked from the very top.
Yes, this all stems from this story. A couple of weeks ago, Nigel Farage announced that his bank account with Coutts had been shut down without any explanation. And there was a story initially that suggested by Simon Jack, the BBC's very well-connected business editor, that was because he didn't meet the financial requirements that were necessary for a bank like Coutts. I think it was something like needing £1 million in his accounts, which obviously not many people reach that threshold. But then it turned out that that account was wrong, and the BBC corrected it. And in fact, he had his account shut down because Coutts believed that he did not align with their values, that he had different values to the bank. And what's happened subsequently is that it turns out that the night before Simon Jack wrote the initial story, he was sat next to Dame Alison Rose, who's the chief executive of NatWest, which owns Coutts, or of which Coutts is part, at a charity dinner. Now, nobody is, I don't think, obviously, I think any journalist would rightly refuse to reveal their sources, and all the BBC has said is that he had very trusted senior sources, but it does shine the spotlight on her and what she knew and whether or not she said anything. And Howard Davies, the chairman of NatWest, is now under pressure to hold a board-level internal inquiry. Nigel Farage has written to him. Of course, NatWest is almost 40% owned by the taxpayer. So the government obviously has also got involved, and Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's question last week, and other senior politicians since have obviously expressed their own concerns about any politician or any individual being having their account shut down because of their political views, whatever side of the fence they may be on. So it's a bit of a, it's a internal row which has exploded externally. And Howard Davies is now in a position where he's going to have to answer to the board and answer to Nigel Farage, which obviously is going to be pretty uncomfortable for the bank. So, all eyes on that to see what they decide, if anything, to do.
Yeah, certainly. It's a story that has raised a lot of ethical questions and questions when it comes to privacy. Let's move on to the front page of City AM, Theo. An interesting story, of course, that is being covered today about the rebranding of Twitter. I must say I missed the Bluebird already.
Yes, it's been rebranded as X, and the members of staff who work for Twitter are going to be known as Xers. I just don't quite know what political journalists or anybody who broadcasters or MPs or anybody who tweets, I don't know what we're supposed to be doing now if we're not tweeting. How do we describe the process of going on to Twitter, or X as it is? It's one of those, you could see that Elon Musk had from the very outset that he had huge plans for when he took over Twitter in this, what was it, $44 billion takeover. But it does seem that from the outside, at least, or maybe from a user's point of view, even, that I'm slightly at a loss as to what we're now meant to be describing ourselves as when we go onto this website to give our views, our news, our opinions, whatever it might be. I thought the Bird, the tweet, the Larry the Bird, and the name and the whole process of the website was, or the app was sort of integral to its existence. But obviously, Elon Musk has different ideas, and there's talk of it turning into a much broader platform where people will find it easier to share video and other content, and not just tweeting whatever they want to be tweeting about at any given time. But I'm slightly at a loss now as to how I describe how I tell my wife what I'm doing when I'm going on this website called X. I'm slightly lost as to what the process is now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't call it a tweet now there's not a bird, but I'm not sure X's is really going to catch on. Pippa, Theo, thanks so much. We'll see you again next hour.